once in a while, I run into a piece of media that embodies exactly what I want my Minecraft build style to be. Anything Studio Ghibli would probably be my main one, but as I watched Arcane Season 2, I realized that the art style was even more specific to what I want my build style to be. Not just highly lovingly detailed, not even painted, but this almost watercolory look on top of all of that. I am no artist, but I want my builds to look like the art of Arcane. I've only been playing Minecraft for 2 years and don't often focus on building, so my build style is still very much developing. But I think this particular realization is going to impact my building so well. I realized I didn't really put that into words well in the last video. I try not to get too much into fandom stuff on my channel because I value originality, but as I've been watching the show with my jaw dropped, it's become a perfect representation of how I want to build in Minecraft. And in the last video, while I did a lot of exploring of building that is fairly foreign to me, I feel like I didn't do well on working in one of the most important aspects in this visual style: color and texture. Now, I'm about to talk about a lot of things that you may well already know or seen someone else talk about, but it's my turn to learn these things now, so buckle up. Yep, this video is now structured like an essay. At least that's how it's outlined in my phone, so y'all get to roll with me. And also, I decided partway through working on screenshots to change the aspect ratio. Roll with that too. Let's start by just working on a giant wall, since it's easiest to do subtle detail on large pieces. Now, the first aspect of color and how it's used is pretty normal, but it got me thinking about my builds, so we're starting at light and shadow. There's a few ways that light and shadow are used and portrayed in this art style, the first one being different shades of the same hue. Look at me using color theory words. I have no idea what I'm doing. Hue is just the color itself, and of course shade is when black is added to a hue. You can really see it in this shot of Mel's workroom, specifically in the shadows on the floor, where the floor in sunlight is a light blue, and the shadows that are cast are simply a darkened version of that blue. A really interesting shot to look at for this is this view of Piltover in the evening golden hour light. With this warm ambered color light, the buildings that are white in daylight are turned to a golden orange, but then you see that the shadows are still just a darker version of that color. Unlike in Mel's office, there's a softer transition between light and shadow, and I love it. But then, we also get shadows that are different colors entirely. You really see this in the alternate universe shot on the Piltover Bridge. These shadows are cast on a warm white pavement, but are themselves that cold dark blue. One of the shots in the show that really sent off fireworks in my brain was this burning log. I'm obsessed with the way the bright red slowly morphs into blackness. In both shadow types, the color of the shadow depends on the interaction of the color of the light and the material it's shining on. I haven't figured out the formula for that, so if you know more about what's going on here, please tell me in the comments. Now, the real question is, what do we use shadow for? Well, we use it in several ways. It can highlight shape and show us the angle of the primary light on the subject, like we see really well on this Zon building. It shows us that there's depth there. It also makes our color palette a lot bigger. But my favorite use of light and shadow is when it's used to highlight what you want the eye to focus on. Like in this shot after the fake Jinx attack, even though the shot is framed in a somewhat skewed way, as if looking up from the ground, your eye immediately goes to the lit side of the building and the message of the graffiti on it. And another favorite, on another level, as Kate crosses the river, you see little pools of light creating shape that drives your eye towards the otherwise mostly dark building. I love it so much. A really interesting element to observe in the show with light and shadow is how it interacts with organics, especially plant life. In this shot, the way the light bled through the leaves at their center really stood out to me, while the outside of the leaves got progressively darker. Meanwhile, in the firelight community, we see a different way that light interacts with the plant in how it filters through the leaves of the tree. Oh, this also reminds me to point out that the way this show is painted is almost impressionistic. The individual brush strokes are so blobby, which is both good news and bad news for Minecraft. With our limited block choices, it's great that we get to transition between those in blob style, but also squares. Speaking of the specific art style, that brings me to point number 2. Now, this is where concepts start getting more specific to the show and its art style. This is the stuff that I want to get better at using. Also, I'm betting that color variance isn't the correct term, but whatever. When I say color variance, what I'm talking about is the way a single surface of one color has variations to the shade or even the hue within it. This is the kind of art that is mesmerizing to me, and this is the kind of art that I want to paint in Minecraft. And if you like the idea of watching someone learn to paint in Minecraft, don't forget to help yourself out by subscribing and helping me out by liking the video. We see plenty of examples of shade variation in the show. For example, in the reflections in the metal in Mel's desk here. Obviously, with this example, the metal is reflective, so it makes sense that there would be some high contrast variation in the color. But then, look at this shot of the airship port. See how in the different whites and browns there's little variations of shade, or sometimes larger variations like stains. They're still the same color as the surface they're on, but still give that little bit of texture to them. But then, and this is what I'm here for, we get hue variation. I won't lie, I don't understand what's going on, I don't know how this works, or what I'm looking at, but I am in love. This is where surfaces of one color have splashes of another color across them while still looking like the same coherent material. Like, look here in this shot of Piltover. See the glass roof here? See the tiles of the roof they're standing on? Or this shot of Victor. He appears to be made of the same cloudy substance, but there's like 5 distinct hues in there. Or this shot in the council room with the kintsugi table, one of my favorite details in the show, by the way. Look how practically every surface has at least one distinct splash of a different hue from the main one. Now, the real question is, how do you do this in Minecraft? One of the reasons I think it can work so well is that the tones used in Arcane are softer than the pure hue. Basically, everything is slightly less saturated. And we straight up don't get that option in Minecraft, so let's figure it out together here. Now, in an ideal world, I think I would use green here, but our options of green kind of suck, actually, in Minecraft. So let's try and find some blocks that are very similar to each other in color. I don't understand how the gradient painter works. Okay, what's the point of setting a block to 12% if it's gonna be like 50% of the actual thing? So that's a little too high contrast. What we need is we need a gradient that actually goes from the purple to whatever color we want. Generate color field, there we go. If we find our purple terracotta somewhere, maybe, that's blue terracotta. Okay, so we have purple terracotta, and we want to go to prismarine, which is there. What if we didn't want to use gray, you know? Then we would probably zoop there, then zoop there, then zoop there. Let's try that. Remember last episode when I said that terracotta was going to be our best friend? This is exactly why. Now, that's a pretty large gradient. It goes to a very distinctly different color. What if we just took the prismarine away and had a slightly smaller gradient? Slightly smaller patch of color. What if we even bumped that down one more? Then we really start seeing this like brushstroke effect. And what if we did it again? At the end of the day, the thing about these brush strokes is that they're not super high contrast. obviously that is difficult to do in Minecraft because blocks by nature contrast a lot, and it's actually very annoying. If we're careful, especially like back off, look at that from a distance. That looks kind of watercolory, brush strokey. And then if we grabbed some blocks from right around this hue and brush stroked those in, especially when you back off, you can really start to see the effect here. Color is always something that I've struggled with in Minecraft builds, but having access to a tool like this, just to find those gradients and find how those colors work together, and thinking about it like brush strokes, I think is something that's going to help me specifically. As we saw when kind of adding and subtracting colors from this, the color variance doesn't always have to be as intense as going all the way to a green with this. Look at this shot with a barely noticeable but also constant hue fluctuation in the windows. This shot nearly ended me, by the way. I stopped breathing. I made my partner play it multiple times. It's beautiful. This is going to be rather limited in Minecraft, obviously, but there are a couple of ways we can help it out. First off, by the actual blocks that we pick, but then also adding a few pieces of well-placed glass. So if we took some purple stained glass and we took some brown stained glass, and maybe we took a tiny bit of cyan stained glass, and we don't want to replace, we want to add now. And we added it in a couple of places like this. This essentially uses anti-aliasing, and obviously I'm not great at it yet. It is not a technique that I have played much with. I think it's a really cool technique and one that I'm excited to explore more. Side note, the place where I really started thinking about like anti-aliasing and builds and understanding what it was, I know like plenty of people have talked about it, used it, illustrated it, all of that. I really started learning about it from a video from Cool2, which I will link down in the description, of course. And now I'm trying to think what like color variations would go here really well. Ooh, look at it. Wait, look at it. Look at the little bit of glass adding a little bit of extra streakiness. Ooh, I love it. Let's take a step back. Oh, yes. Okay. I like this immensely. And the really cool thing about adding like color details like this is that then when you have a swath of blank wall like that, it's still, let's take that one away. When you have a swath of blank wall like this here, it holds a lot more interest. Now, I may have overdone it a little bit, but now this crimson magenta swath at the front feels more like it's actually in the art style of the show, at least to me. Look how satisfying that looks. Anyways, a big lesson that I'm learning just right here is that a lot of gradients are going to pass through gray, but you don't have to accept that linear path. You can twist and turn your way through color gradients to get to what you want. But then, we get different materials layered on top of each other. I know, I'm way too excited about this, but it's not something I think about very frequently in my own Minecrafting. With the one major exception of my ice castle, I usually just assume that my builds have to be made of clearly defined sections of homogeneous material. My absolute favorite illustration of this in the show is when Jinx explodes powder, paint, pigment into Piltover, and this deep purple substance streaks over the windows of Mel's office. Not even counting the, the art. I feel like I could stare at this one frame for hours and still learn something. Look at the shade variation of the purple stuff that gives it depth, how it's lighter around the edges of the streak where the substance is thinner and darker in the center where it's thicker. Actually, I feel like I did this really well in the ice castle. I need to use this more. I'm not ready to stop thinking about this though, so let's look at another example that we used earlier. This time, it's the shot right after the fake Jinx attack. It's really simple, right? Just graffiti on a wall. But how often do we do that in Minecraft? Not enough, that's for sure. And here's the thing, depending on the scale of the build, you could do it either on the same layer of blocks as the wall, or if it's large enough, you could even do a raised effect. Okay, I'm starting to have too many ideas, too many things that I want to play with. Building's gonna get intense for me, guys. It's gonna get intense. Oh. Stefan, you were right. Anyways, let's take a quick little dabble into plant life again, because look at this leaf. We've got examples of different hues, both in the leaf itself, and then a different material altogether in the corruption on the leaf. Of course, we would treat this like we would anything else in this category, but I love seeing it applied to organic materials. Now, one of the aspects of the art in the show that you might not think would impact Minecraft building as much would be framing. I think most of us are probably at least a little familiar with the rule of thirds, which is the idea that if you divide a frame into thirds both horizontally and vertically, the most pleasing compositions are going to place the subject somewhat along those lines. For example, a full-body character with their head close to the top horizontal line, or in a close-up, the eyes specifically at that horizontal line. Usually, this rule operates off of the subject facing towards the center of the shot. But we start seeing the real power of this rule, like with many rules, when we start breaking it. This shot only becomes more powerful by the fact that it's centered when it's surrounded by shots that are following that rule of thirds. Or when this moment happens and we realize, oh, it's about to get real by the way the door is centered. So how does that apply to our Minecraft builds? Well, for one thing, it's helpful to know what sightlines to use to guide our eyes towards what we want people to look at. Those rules of thirds are quite handy for that. It's also helpful to understand that we like seeing things balanced by threes. Have you noticed that many of the best Minecraft builds are asymmetrical in some way? And they're often balanced in some relationship to 3, which is something that I overlook in my building all the time. But then, if we get used to using off-center sightlines to balance our builds, the moments where we place something directly in the center makes even more of an impact. Maybe this is all slightly more just my own opinion, but I think for myself anyways, there's some merit to considering the effects of what framing we utilize in our own builds. I'm really happy that I got to sit down and really analyze what I like about the visuals of the show. I think that now that I've put these ideas into words, this is going to make a huge difference in how I think about my Minecraft building from here. And I'm so excited to put these ideas into practice. Now that's what I'm talking about. So, to follow along with that journey, check out this playlist from my building world, which is also my very first world. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!